one, yeah, we banded them with a numbered U.S. Geological Survey band. We took several measurements to determine if it was male or female, and fitted them with a PTT using a backpack-style harness. These two people are sitting in the front row here that you see in the picture there. My wife and my technician, Ryan. Ryan's just checking the straps to make sure they're not folded there, not strangling the bird or anything like that, obviously. And this is the final result. Then we release them.
Wow.
And we track these birds until the PTT fails. If we get multiple year data, that's what we're looking for.
They've never come back and get you? What was the question? I took the SWAT out of them because they were indignant.
Okay, so we get the satellite location data. With Doppler units, it's not all absolutely precise, but it is kind of rated. So we took the best rated location data from each on-cycle. That's the sorted data. We took those sorted points, plot them onto maps using this ArcGIS software. ArcGIS is also very handy at measuring distances between points, or between ranges, or whatever else we need to measure. For this presentation, I'd like to discuss the collective winter and summer range extent and the individual travels of some of the individual eagles that were on the air for at least a year and a half or showed us some interesting behavior. This map shows all of the sorted points for all 17 eagles and for all seasons and years, giving you that big picture of the areas used. Collectively, the winter range, which is shown in blue points, and I have a blow-up of it over here, extends from as far south as the Illinois, Mississippi rivers, as far north as actually southeast Minnesota and western Wisconsin. A couple of them got that far north. But this is the winter range over here. Summer range, which is shown in red points, extends out from the upper Mississippi River migration corridor as far south as northern Minnesota, as far east as western Ontario, up into Nunavut along the bay of, alongside Hudson Bay there, and as far west as eastern Saskatchewan. Now let's take a brief look at some of the individual eagle travels, starting with Eagle 221. Over the 4 winters this adult male was on the air, he chose a different core winter range each time. From as far south as the Mississippi and Illinois rivers to as far north as just west of Eagle Valley. The circle points on the map show where and when he left his winter range each year. Unfortunately, this PTT was an earlier one, and it did stop transmitting from time to time, which left gaps in our data. But despite those gaps, we know we arrived on the summer range between the 14th of June and the 13th of July. His 3 spring migrations lasted less than 113 to 143 days. Distances covered ranged from 1,069 to 1,239 straight line miles. That's not the route he necessarily went. It's from winter range to summer range, straight line. 221 did maintain a very confined summer range all 3 years, showing strong sight fidelity. Possible breeder. He departed the summer range in a brief 4-day period in mid-October all 3 years. The northern portion of his fall migration route showed some variability. In 2000, he chose to migrate south on the west side of Lake Winnipeg, but in 2001 and 2002 on the east side. When he got further south, the migration route was essentially the same in all the years. Migration duration was 32 to 77 days for the fall migration. 221 arrived on the winter range between mid-November and late December. The circled area shown here represent his approximate winter ranges each year. He had relatively confined winter range during the first 2 years, although in different places, here and here. He had increased range extent and mobility within the range in the 3rd year, and even greater range extent and mobility in the 4th year. We actually had 2 distinct focal points.
Did you look at weather during those years?
That would be another whole study, but
Yeah.
so not really. We have anecdotally, but not full-time, I guess you could say. 217 is an adult male that was tracked for 7 full years, and we got nearly daily data. He wintered along the Mississippi all 7 years in this 135-mile stretch of the river. Every year, 217 began his northbound migration from the same place, that circled area on the map. dates on the winter range were the 3rd to the 30th of March. The southern part of the spring migration showed quite a bit of variability from as far west as eastern Iowa, as far east as central Wisconsin up the Wisconsin River Valley, but kind of like the last bird, once they get around the point of Lake Superior there, route was essentially the same the rest of the way up. 221 arrived on the winter range in late March to early April. The 7 spring migrations took between 6 and 31 days. Now, 217 visited 3 successive areas I refer to as summer range 1, 2, and 3 each summer. He was always very mobile during the summer months, traveling to the same ranges at about the same time every year. At his northernmost summer range, he was about 928 straight line miles from Eagle Valley, from his winter range, rather. And he always returned to summer range 1 prior to beginning his southbound migration. 217 left the summer range between late October and mid-November. Fall migrations covered much the same area as the spring migrations, but had a little less east to west variation. They lasted from 23 to 68 days. A duration largely determined by the length of stopover periods in southern Ontario and northern Minnesota. 217 typically returned to the winter range from late November through mid-December, but didn't arrive until the 22nd of January in 2006 after a very lengthy stopover in northern Minnesota. Mobility on the winter ranges varied. 2 winters he was rather sedentary. Other years he moved up to 117 miles, sometimes several times up and down the river in the same winter. My mouse is acting up here. I can't advance. It's kind of stuck. I can see it right. My technician's in the front row just in case. Suppose I'm not a techie guy. Can we get off the screen? Just have that.
Check the battery.
That'll work. Thank you. All right, so Eagle 365. This was an adult female that spent the majority of her 4 monitored winters in the Eagle Valley area. She departed her winter range from mid-January to late February, leaving later each year. She annually followed the Mississippi River north to near Minneapolis-St. Paul and veered toward the Chippewa National Forest in north central Minnesota, arriving between the 6th and the 12th of March all 4 years. This was a significant stopover point for 365, who lingered there every year for about 2 to 2.5 months. Every year, though, she left. She went north, often at an impressive rate, and headed toward the west shore of Hudson Bay in northern Manitoba and southern Nunavut, arriving on the summer range between the 8th and the 16th of June. Her spring migrations lasted 111 to 151 days. Straight line distance from winter range to summer range was 1,139 to a little over 1,300 miles. She was fairly mobile on the summer range every year, suggesting she was not a breeder. Most of her time was spent just west or north of Churchill, Manitoba. She left the summer range between the 4th and the 28th of September. On the southbound migration, she got right back to Chippewa National Forest in northern Minnesota, arriving between the 27th of September and the 22nd of October. She paused there as she had done on the spring migration, but now for only about 1 month instead of 2 to 2.5 like in the spring. She then continued on south on a similar route each fall. Spring and fall migration routes were similar for her. She arrived on the winter range on late October to mid-December, arriving earlier each year. Fall migrations lasted 47 to 77 days. She maintained a limited winter range in and around Eagle Valley all 4 winters, except for the winter of 03-04, when she actually went 116 miles upriver, stayed 6 weeks, then decided to come back to Eagle Valley for the rest of the winter. Guess more than much better on that greener grass on the other side. Adult female 614 was trapped for 20 months. We received lots of high-quality data every day. She had a VHF transmitter on her. She spent the winters right near Eagle Valley, so that made local tracking efforts really easy and efficient and fun. Both winters were spent in or near Eagle Valley. She left Eagle Valley in early to mid-March. Both springs, she migrated a similar route up the Mississippi River through northern Minnesota, then up to Little Echo Lake in southeast Manitoba, 555 straight-line miles from Eagle Valley. Those trips lasted 15 and 9 days for those 2 years. And she didn't waste much time. The main point I want to make about 614 is the vast difference in mobility on the summer range in the 2 consecutive years that she was tracked. After reaching Little Echo Lake the first spring, she stayed in the area just 2.5 weeks and began moving extensively along and east of Lake Winnipeg in that red circled area. The most northern point visited twice that summer was 801 miles from her winter range. And after numerous back and forth trips in that area, she returned to Little Echo Lake where her summer travels began by late November. Now, in contrast to that gypsy-like summer of 2005, the summer of 2006 could hardly have been more sedentary. Her signal seemed so stationary on Little Echo Lake through early July, she got me worried a little bit. What's going on? Did she kick that transmitter off? Is she dead? We didn't know. So we drove 800 miles on the hottest day of July. It kind of made this day pale. And of course, about 3 or 4 hours on the way up, the air conditioning went out, and we were 4 guys and all of our gear were just cooking in my little S10 Blazer. But we made it up there just fine. After we spent the night up there, and then the next morning we took this 20-mile boat ride to get to Little Echo Lake, because that's the only way we could get there. But we found it within minutes, and we were able to verify the location data point. She did not appear to have a nest, but was in the company of an adult male. This little chunk of granite out in the middle of the lake was her sweet spot. And if you look in this tree, I don't have to mark right here in just a sec. See that little white spot up there? That's her. That was her sweet spot. That's where she spent a lot of time. That's where we got a lot of our data from. We searched all around the shores of the lake trying to find a nest, found none. Went back in, had a bite of supper. The owner of this little fishing lodge was a pilot. Somehow we managed to get me in the back seat. Plunged and stuffed me in there. It was so small. But we went up and looked for a nest from an aerial perspective, and we found none then either. But where do you think she was? Sitting in that same perch again.
Sweet spot.
In her sweet spot, that's right. Adult female 615 was monitored just 7 months between January and August of 05. The green line depicts her spring migration, which is impressive in and of itself, covering 1,306 miles between the 5th of March and the 30th of May. What was perhaps even more interesting was an extensive summer trek that she made just days after arriving on her summer range. Once again, we had a PTT that behaved perfectly, had some gaps in data, but we know for a fact she flew at least 1,461 miles in about a month. Now, we normally like to think of eagles being energy efficient, feathers in general being energy efficient. Why would they do something like that? It must be a very powerful resource to draw them that far south. And I suspect she truly went down to this place where she laid over for about 2 months, which would be more than 1,461 miles. And I can't answer that question. I've not actually read in the literature of any adult eagles making such summer flights of that magnitude. So it'll remain a mystery, I guess, at least for now. And interestingly enough, too, with this PTT, there was nothing for 17 months. Not a lick of data came in. And then went back on in January of 07. Intermittently, but we were able to track her through April of that year when she was heading back north. And she apparently shed her PTT in northern Minnesota at that time. We drove there to look for that, but we found neither her nor the PTT. But you see, that gives me just a little bit of hope that maybe D1's transmitter might go on again. So, glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Adult female 291 was fitted with her transmitter in January of 2010, and her unit transmitted through April of 14. Very limited mobility, very much a homebody on both the summer and winter range. As you can see by the green lines and the gold lines, she had some variability in her spring and fall migration routes. She had 4 different winter night routes when she was down on her winter range, all right around Eagle Valley, just a few miles away, actually. But I was curious about the summer range. Again, very tight summer range. A lot of readings came from the same spot. Had to be a nest there. So I was making plans actually to go up there and visit it. Got to talking to a friend. He knew a friend who took these like spring and summer-long canoe trips up in the Canadian backwaters, little creeks and crevices. He would just meander down with his canoe. He was looking for a destination in 2013. I gave him one. Go find that nest. And he did. It took him about 2.5 months to get there. And he found her nest. Now, that year, she was not raising any young. But the native people of that area said they were young out of that nest last year, the year before, in 2012. So that was great news to find out. Now, in phase 1, what did we learn? fidelity to the routes of those that we had multiple years tracking, we found out that they did generally have fidelity to their migration routes, though 3 of our birds did show some variation. North and southbound routes for each bird were similar as well, except for those same 3 birds. What about fidelity and mobility on the winter ranges? Of the 8 eagles tracked for 2 or more winters, 4 showed strong winter range fidelity and low mobility. They went to the same place, they didn't move much. 3 others showed some fidelity to a particular area, but moved about throughout the winter using some of the same areas in subsequent years. The 8th, Eagle 221, showed the least fidelity to a particular winter range, and he was highly mobile, spending time in various areas, though some of the same areas were visited, if only briefly, in subsequent years. Fidelity and mobility on the summer ranges. 7 eagles were tracked for 2 or more summer periods. All 7 showed strong fidelity to those ranges, but mobility on the range varied greatly between birds and often between years for the same bird. Breeders, or those with strong ties to a territory, restricted their activities to a small range each year, whereas non-breeders moved often and or long distances, sometimes in the same or similar areas in successive years, and often with remarkable regularity. That was very impressive. Another little tidbit that we found out corroborates other research. About half of the adults that we tracked appeared to be breeders. Other half were not. That's sort of corroborated with other reports as well. They don't all go up there and have eagles. You know, that's just not the way it really is. So that was kind of a nice little tidbit.
Interesting.
Spring migration, duration, and distance. Spring migration began between the 12th of January and the 30th of March. It ended with arrival on the summer range between the 18th of February and the 17th of June. Spring migration took from 4 to 151 days to complete. Straight line distances from winter to the northernmost summer ranges range from 368 to 1,381 miles. Fall migration duration began on the 4th of September through the 19th of December. It ended with arrival on the winter range between the 20th of October and the 22nd of January. Fall migrations lasted 15 to 77 days. It was interesting that these tracking dates that we found correlated very well with what we've observed for years doing our migration counts at Eagle Valley. Fall migration for bald eagles generally peaks about the 2nd week of December. By then you're getting a lot of cold weather up north, a lot of snow cover, a lot of ice cover. Less foraging opportunity prompts them south. That's when we see them in the big numbers. And that means you've got to bundle up, because it might be 0 with wind chills 20 below, northwest wind blowing 20, 30 miles an hour, but that's when you're going to see a lot of eagles. That's typically the best time. Spring migration is a lot gentler on the migration counters, because that generally happens after all the cold weather, when you get a sudden warm-up. 2nd week of March is key. If you get a quick warm-up, where you get 50, 60 degrees maybe, south winds blowing, pushing those eagles north, those are huge days. Our best day ever was March 13th of 2007, when we tallied 1,523 eagles in 6 hours. Our best hour was like 400. There were 4 of us out there. It was all we could do to keep up. Our son was striding. I had to tell him, Jacob, look up. You may never see anything like this again. It's just raging furiously. It's amazing. I just put a table together here to give you an idea how fast some birds can travel, some eagles can travel during migration. Some are over multiple days, some are over just a few hours. We've got 217, traveled 199 miles in a little over 6 hours, averages under 13 miles an hour. 944 bested that by a little bit, 210 miles in a little over 6 1/3 hours, 33 miles an hour. So it gives you kind of an idea how fast these guys travel. So, the adult phase of the portion is kind of winding down. We're analyzing all of our data, reading everything we can get our hands on in North American eagle migration. And the literature suggests in several places that immatures are highly nomadic. Didn't really say what that meant. Immatures, is it just first-year birds, or is it until they reach sexual maturity? Didn't really say. And nomadic wasn't really defined either. We had 2 immatures in this initial study. Their behavior didn't look that much different than the adults, so kind of got us to wonder if we got to look into this a little bit more closely. At the same time, Bob and I are talking, says the most common asked question, most frequently asked question I get is, where do those Decorah fledglings go after they leave the nest? Well, I think we need to work together here, and we did. We thought it was a great union of our goals, and so we began to capture, as you know, some of the Decorah fledglings and track them. Many people were involved with that as well. Of course, Bob and Amy were instrumental. Hatchery folks were very helpful. Carol and Ryan and Jason, my other technician, were pivotal. We had Lynches and Millers taking these awesome photographs for us, which is great. We had some volunteers and journalists involved as well. This is before I knew N2 was down.
Yeah.
And I know you don't need a big red arrow to identify where N1 is, but there's one here anyhow. But, so that's our focus in this part of this presentation. It doesn't want to advance. The spinning wheel of death. Okay, I'm going to jump right past what I wanted to show. Let's try that one more time.
Last year.
This was. Yeah. There we go. This is the capture of D14 in 2012. As you know, we have this ring pattern with monofilament nooses around it and a fish in the middle. Get the competitive juices going. You got one of those immatures down there already. D14 says, I better get down and get some before it's gone. That's very often been the case. You get a little competition between them. So you get two birds down there. 14 is the one sitting right next to the trap, which is hard to see because we kind of nestled into the mulch. So, well, that looks like fish. So taste it first. Yeah, it tastes like fish. Good enough to put a foot on, try to take it away. Sucker's heavier than it used to be. We're going to use 2 feet.
Mom.
When we use 2 feet, that we got him in one of those snares. So we knew it, so Ryan and I go dashing after him. Wasted word halfway there before he even moves. We gather him up. You'll see it here in a little bit. We gather him up and Ryan takes the nooses off the toe, and of course we go back to Bob's place then and put the transmitter on. Gets up before I advance. There he is, all safe and sound. One little string on his toe.
How long does it take? I'm sorry. How long does it take from capture to release for you to do all your?
Maybe an hour,
okay.
hour, 10 minutes, something like that. This is actually D1 getting her transmitter put on. Yeah, I know. She got a sweet spot in all of ours. We've kind of talked about this, so I won't dwell on it too much longer, but we'll go to look at her data here, which is pretty cool. As you recall, her first year, she did a little trek up into northern Wisconsin, northwest Wisconsin, went up as far as a little northwest of the tip of Lake Superior, hung out there in early September, back down, spent some time in Black River Falls area, and then by New Year's Eve was back around Decorah. That was year 1. Year 2, got a little bit more bold and adventurous, I'd say. If you look at the 2012, the triangle green path, you kind of see a little bit of up and down, a little bit of nomadic behavior, I guess you might say, on her way all the way up to Polar Bear Provincial Park in northern Ontario. That first year, she covered 1,275 miles in that spring migration. On the fall migration, she didn't even use the same route. She kind of went a little different route. Got down to Lake Superior, kind of bounced down the shoreline, ended up hanging out in northeast Iowa over the winter. Next year, a little bit more direct, kind of took a different route, closer to her fall migration route, up to James Bay, bounced up the shore, back up to Polar Bear Provincial Park. In the third spring, even more refined route, a little bit tighter. That would be this one right here. But same destination. 3 years in a row she goes to Polar Bear Provincial Park. There's something that drew her up there. Now I always ask myself, if there wasn't 270 degrees of water all around, would she have kept going northeast? I guess we'll never know, but apparently that park was right for her. Would have been nice if we could have kept her on for a couple more years, you know, when she became an adult and see where she settled down, but who knows, maybe it'll still happen. Then D14 in 2012, we tracked his path here so he could follow a little bit easier, did a little exploratory jaunt down here in early September. Went down to visit various watersheds. September and October. Of course, he was fatally electrocuted in the middle of November. But it did kind of show a fairly nomadic behavior for that first-year bird. Decor 2014. Somebody should write a book about that one. Somebody did. Thank you for doing it. I can't wait to pour over that. That year there was elation, there was tragedy, there was hope. We finally caught two siblings the same year, so we could begin to look at whether they traveled together or independently. That blow was extinguished about 4 days after Indy was fitted with his transmitter when he was tragically electrocuted. And with 4, there was quite a bit of babysitting time, helping her through her various perils. She learned the ropes. Many of those perils we would have never known about had she not had a transmitter on, so that was very helpful. But you know what, she figured it out, and eventually headed south through Iowa. She did leave later than her predecessors did, but her first-year travels looked like what we might expect, you know, somewhat nomadic, but with some apparent intent. First year of life is very difficult for eagles, we're all aware of that, and we continue to learn more about that with the help of the PTTs. And 4 made it through the most difficult part, that first winter. Tough finding food, but she did it. And she too chose an unsafe pole to perch on and was fatally electrocuted. Told Bob, the transmitter's not moving, doesn't look good. He went out and checked it, recovered the body. She was in superb condition. She was fat, muscled, her feathers and her feet looked wonderful. Such a shame. Yes?
By any chance have any photographs of the towers that these birds are getting electrocuted on?
I don't in this presentation, but I know, I'm sure Bob and Amy, I know, took several pictures of some of those pools that were the culprits.
You can connect with me on that later. We do have some out and I can send people to them, so.
Now, last year I had hoped to fit several other fledglings from our region with transmitters, but the fledging rate in our region was terrible, and I attribute the incredibly high numbers of black flies and gnats harassing the young eagles and other bird species, and that was a key reason, I think, for the low fledging rate. So no other fledglings were fitted with transmitters that summer aside from these decor birds. So we caught some birds in the wintertime, this past winter, and deployed some transmitters on immature birds at that time. Now, in addition to using the familiar PTTs that we've been using for all those years, I began also using cell tower transmitters, or CTTs. There are disadvantages and advantages from CTTs to PTTs. CTTs are very accurate, like a GPS, good accuracy, shorter lifespan. The main disadvantage is when they leave cell tower coverage, you get no data. You have no idea what's happening to your bird until they return to cell tower coverage. At that time, stored data is downloaded and you can figure out where they have been. But I gave it a try. So we caught 5 birds this past winter. Hatch year, second year, third year. 1 female, 4 males. First 3 got PTTs, second 2 got CTTs. Very quick overview of where they went. This is 305. She gets the frequent flyer miles award. She racked up almost 3,400 miles since she left Eagle Valley, with several significant doublebacks. This right here is a 500-mile doubleback. And she only waited a couple days down at the bottom before she went back north. It's good, strong pectoral muscles, I guess. Anyhow, right now she's kind of slowly going up. She's getting close to Churchill, Manitoba at this particular day. This is 306, a hatch year male, who wandered a bit initially after he was fitted with his PTT, then ended up heading over to the Mississippi River floodplain near East Dubuque, Illinois, in a very small area, and hung out there for about 2.5 months. Again, that area was so small, like another bird we talked about, made me a little nervous. Is he doing okay? So twice we went down there with the VHF receiver and the Yagi antenna, tracked him. Within minutes, we found him. He's just fishing the backwaters. He just had a real sweet spot there, and he didn't move far from it at all. Now, since late May, he stuck around until late May. At that time, he started migrating, and he migrated fairly quickly up into Manitoba. And he's been hanging around here. He's actually just north of Lake Winnipeg as of today.
Wow.
He kind of did a little backtracking in there as well. 307 is a second-year male that ventured as far south as the Quad Cities of Illinois and Iowa before heading north in early March. So far, he's traveled the farthest north and is actually hanging right around Churchill, Manitoba these days, right up in this stretch, kind of going back and forth. Another second-year male, Eagle 912, was fitted with the first CTT in late February. Unit worked great through his migration into Minnesota until March 18th, when he apparently flew out of cell tower range. Haven't heard a peep out of him since. Anxiously awaiting him to come back with the cell tower coverage so we can fill in some data points, and I'm just hoping he's okay in the meantime. And then finally, the final eagle of this past winter is a third-year male. Originally wasn't going to take third-year males. I was trying to stick to 1 and 2-year-olds. But I had a CTT in hand. It's got a lifespan of maybe 1.5 to 2 years. That's what it's rated. Thinking I'm still going to get a couple of years max of immature migration data from a 3-year-old bird. So if I get an opportunity at a 3-year-old, I've got to go for it. Because the next day, right behind my trapping station, they're going to demolish this barn. So I'm done trapping as of this particular day. It was March 12th. So lo and behold, I get a 3-year-old to come in. I take it. This bird stuck around Eagle Valley on the Mississippi River just on the southern end of the property until June 19th. I thought maybe he was going to stick around all summer. But he finally left, headed up the Big River, kind of went into northwestern Wisconsin a little bit, and then took a tap northwest. And actually, late June, he kind of went off the air a little bit, but came back on about a week later, so we were able to fill in those data points. But he's off the air again from the last week. So again, at least I know kind of how these CTTs work a little bit. And again, we're hopeful that he comes back on the air here real soon. So what's the future? We have 4 transmitters to deploy this summer on fledglings. We're focused on 2 nests near Eagle Valley, which fledge 2 and 3 young each. We've been offering a 5-star catering service with a smorgasbord of food every day. I cannot get these birds to come down and start feeding on it. We're going to continue to offer food as long as they stick around, with the hopes of getting a couple of these guys transmitted. And if that doesn't happen, I will have to resort to winter capture. But again, then we're not looking at local birds. We're looking at winter migrants coming down from up north, which is still good data. We have in the plans, we have 3 more PTTs, possibly CTTs, planned for summer of 2016 as well. That will conclude our trapping efforts of immature birds. And after that, of course, we'll analyze the data and present something for publication. That's all I have, folks. I want to thank you for your time and attention.
Please feel welcome to.
Yeah.
So we have some time for questions.
Good. Now, all those birds exhibit what I call fairly narrow range of flight. They all go north. I don't see any birds going off, let's say, to Wyoming, or any birds actually going across Lake Michigan into Michigan, or further east. There's no birds going south.
Over big bodies of water is difficult.
So how do they get? Is that ingrained into them that that's just where their narrow range is going to be? Since these are new birds, where do they get this track that the only place they're going to go is north? If I could characterize it.
Even the southern birds, southern-born eagles, tend to go north in the summertime, probably beating the heat. Not sure. That's probably an innate thing. Nothing learned, certainly, because they're not following adults. But yes, most of them do go northwest to northeast somewhere. The young birds do. Again, we're talking the young birds that are from around here mostly. What's the other part? Over the bodies of water, thermals, really hard to keep sustained flight going for an extended period of time when you don't have any lift. There's a lot of work then. So that's why you don't see them crossing the big bodies of water like Lake Michigan. Does that answer?
Yeah, well, like nobody's taking off for Wyoming or anything like
No.
that.
It sometimes can happen. I mean, you can certainly get birds going off in canyons. I've read, not in my study, but I have read in other studies where birds do go kind of laterally, quite a way sometimes. So it's not unheard of.
But there are lots of birds over in those areas, so
There are.
I presume they would exhibit the same pattern. Wherever they're hatched, they would go north and south from that area.
Regionally, we found there's several migration corridors. You've got each coast. The Rocky Mountains is a big corridor, and it's a visual landmark thing too, oftentimes. Rocky Mountains is another one. There's the coastline, and the Mississippi River, where we're at. It's a visual landmark. It tends to keep them kind of going north and south. And again, I think it's an innate thing that they generally go north and south in the spring and in the fall. But there are certainly those that go off on tangents east and west a little bit, but they generally don't continue to go that way. Yes?
Do you ever look at bands on birds that you see? I mean, is there any way that you capture the birds that have bands, that you notice have bands to find out where they came from?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Each of those banded birds has its own number. The bird banding lab, all banders send in their data every year on all the birds that they've tracked with the numbers. And then if there's a return on that, if somebody else gets an idea, gets an ID on that band number, they can call the bird banding lab. It's an 800 number you call. You can find out where it was originally caught or banded, as well as any subsequent recaptures.
Okay. Now, I volunteered at a wildlife center in Wisconsin, and we had a banded Julie come in from Florida.
Huh. How cool.
And it was the hatch year.
Huh.
I mean, we had it, it was, hatched, and she came through our center in September.
Okay.
So, I mean, it couldn't have taken that very, long to get up there from Florida.
You may have been coming back too, because a lot of those southern birds go quite far north. They do, yeah. Louisiana birds, there's a fellow that I kind of mentored a little bit, and I still get updates on Nick Smith, is his name, out of Louisiana. He's been putting satellite transmitters on birds, and it's been fun to watch his birds go, I mean, even further distances than our birds go, because they're starting out a lot further south, and our birds generally haven't been known to go that far south. But yes, they do make those summer treks up north and then come back in the fall. Yes.
How do they shed their transmitters? I mean, does
It's a
their
good
strap
question.
break? Or?
Normally, well, I really don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I could have seen it, so I could have learned that aspect of it. We put them on there comfortably, and it's hard to imagine that they could kind of wiggle out. It shouldn't happen. It could just wear. It's possible. This one was on the air for several years, and I could see that even Teflon ribbon, which is pretty durable stuff, could wear out or somehow get cut, perhaps, at that point, maybe when it is getting a little bit worn. Good question. Saw a hand, yes?
Do they seem to use approximately the same corridors that, like the geese and some of those use, or I'm thinking food maybe too? Is there more fish following
certainly
the big the rivers and stuff like that?
Yeah,
It sounds
certainly.
like Rocky Mountains, less population, and possibly more food.
Right. Well, obviously with the Mississippi, that's what I can speak to the most knowledgeably. Yes, lots of food following that same corridor. Lots of waterfowl. You've probably seen Neil Reddick's bald eagle production with them chasing after the ducks and all that. A lot of food there, a lot of fish, a lot of waterfowl, carrion. But yes, certainly a lot of food. So they do sort of follow the similar flight patterns that some of those other birds do. And again, it's a visual thing for not just raptors, not just waterfowl, but songbirds as well. A lot of birds follow
I'm
that.
looking at being so close to the fish hatchery, and so much now, I mean, we're overfishing. A lot of the stream, Canada's not as bad as we are. But with the stocking and things like that, to see if by chance those corridors may be shutting down in the future, I think about.
Well, certainly migration does change as things like that change. I've read of other cases out west where certain fish supplies dry up. And yes, you have many fewer eagles going by there anymore. Where it used to be a boon and a great place to either stop over for a while and gas up, so to speak. Now you have very few birds there. So yes, things do change as fisheries, ebb and flow. Yes.
Did you notice a significant difference between the male birds and the female birds when they were migrating?
Our sample size is fairly small. A little bit, but I wouldn't want to go out on a limb and say, yeah, there's a dramatic difference. And it's a little bit different than what we might expect. I can't get into a whole lot of detail without really getting into a lot of detail. But not a lot.
The males
Not a
didn't
lot.
ask for directions.
I'm wondering about ultimate goals of the research to compare to the other corridors or land management or behavior, eco behavior for future, or what is the ultimate goal of all this research over time?
The the goal for me was, we've got to learn where these birds go. When they go there and under what circumstances, because if we don't know those basics, how can we possibly expect to manage the species?
Right, okay,
So-
so for conservation.
Absolutely.
Land management.
Yes.
And, okay, yeah.
Absolutely. How are we doing on time?
I think we're doing just fine. I'm gonna run up and check with Neil and Laura real well, so go ahead and, real quick, so go ahead and answer
Okay.
one more question.
Are you planning on tracking siblings after last year again?
I'm
in the
hopeful,
future?
I'm hopeful we get that opportunity. Like I said, this year, I'm having a hard time getting a bird to come down to me, much less siblings. But yes, I was very hopeful of that in the beginning. That'd be wonderful to find out. That's just a bonus if I can get that to
It would
happen.
be interesting to know, yeah. What about tail feather transmitters? Are you using tail feather transmitters?
I don't know if there are any that would stay on for very long. You're going to lose them with every molt, so you're not going to get long-term data. You're not going to get, something that you can repeat for multiple years and find out if there's any fidelities around and things of that nature. Probably lightweight, but they're probably not going to last very long anyhow.
So
if they're
it's
that
not,
light.
not something being used much?
Not, to my knowledge, not right now, not
Because
yet.
Bob was talking about that last year, and then it kind of fizzled this year.
Probably, yeah, I know what you're talking about. But again, it's a matter of duration. It would probably be great for a year or so. Even those little amber falcons that we were looking at, they have these really lightweight transmitters. It's good for about a year, maybe you squeeze a year and a half out of it, that'd be about it. And again, if it's tail on, it's going to get shed with every molt.
But it would help at least have us understand where siblings go the first year.
This is true.
You know.
This is true. Boy, good point. Yeah.
Could you explain what you said about breeders and non-breeders? Is it the age thing, or are there just a certain percentage that never breed? Is that
I wouldn't say they never breed, but they don't necessarily breed every year.
Oh.
And that's, again, through the literature search, we found that's not uncommon. That again, 4 of the 8 that we tracked for multiple years just didn't seem like they could possibly pull off a clutch because they're too mobile or weren't up there long enough. Like in the case of those northern latitude birds, they weren't up there long enough to pull off a clutch.
Is that kind of tied to raptors versus songbirds, or?
I'm sorry, what was the
I
last
mean, do
one?
raptors tend to then be that way where songbirds breed every year?
I'm just talking eagles,
Yeah.
because that's what we've got research on. Bald eagles, and that agrees with several other articles that I read too, where roughly half of the population is kind of just floating. The others more active breeders.
So are you gonna try to put a tracking on either one of the decor siblings? You're saying no, you were using another nest.
This year,
Yeah.
haven't tried to get them down. We've had some distraction, and it takes a lot of groundwork to, it's not as much of a difficulty with the core because in the past anyhow, the birds have been pretty good about coming down. But we found in Grant County, you gotta work to get these birds to come down.
Yeah, you had mentioned another area, okay.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to do it in any area where we get the opportunity, in this region anyhow, that's kind of my goal. Yes.
If you don't put transmitters on this year's from Decorah, can you ban them so that if something would happen, we would know that something?
Well, if I could get them in my hand to ban them,
Yeah.
I'd like to put a transmitter on. Get the bonus, Yes.
Question, are the Decorah eagles here the exception? That is, they just stay in this area? I got the impression they just stay in this
The
area.
adults?
The adults, yes.
In this latitude, and I'm learning this myself just over the last decade or so, that a lot of the birds that nest in this latitude are not necessarily migratory. They're year-round residents. You don't have to go too far north to find birds that migrate out on a regular basis. I can't tell you yet what percentage of birds in this general latitude are migratory and which ones are year-round residents, but it seems there are more residents than I previously thought, I'll tell you that. It seems like at least half of them stick around year-round.
It seems like every bird you put a transmitter on went all over the place. You didn't report on a bird that just stuck right around within a 100-mile
This is true.
radius.
The birds locally that we put transmitters on, well, the Decorah birds,
Yeah.
young birds often do summer migrations. They'll go north a ways. We're finding that out to be true in this area as well. And most of the other birds were northern birds that came down to our area. But yes, I'm still kind of waiting. And that's why I thought maybe 629, the last CTT bird that we put out. Stuck around for so long, I thought, maybe I caught a local bird. It's 3 years old. Maybe he's not going to go anywhere. Well, he finally took off too. So,
He'll be back.
But when they become breeders, I think it becomes a different thing. Then they have
Yeah.
a territory to defend, and I think a lot of them just don't leave. They don't have to give up defense of that territory. They're always there. They can always defend it year-round.
How long does it take before they become breeders?
Usually the 5th year.
Okay, now this is gonna be the last question, because we have to have you guys, we have to take a little break so Neil and Laura can move in here and we can get their stuff set up. So Brent, whoever you want to pick, unless you want me to pick.
Can you talk about a little bit about your valley, the Eagle Valley Nature Preserve, and how you're funded in this?
Kohler Company owns it. As I mentioned, Kohler Company and the Kohler Trust for Preservation own the property. They bought it back in 1989. It's managed as a wildlife sanctuary, basically. We do a lot of habitat restoration. We do our wildlife research, tons of maintenance, as you can imagine, on 1,450 acres. It's not open to the public. It's just for wildlife. Anything else I can?
And how's your research funded then?
Kohler Trust for Preservation has been fantastic the last several years. They have been my best source of funding. I did have multiple sources early on when I was doing smaller projects, but since they've started probably a decade ago, they've been fantastic. Very supportive, wonderful, wonderful meetings.
And you publish a lot.
I don't publish a lot. I'm not an avid writer. I will be publishing from time to time. I've done some in like our Wisconsin Ornithological Society magazine, and then the Journal of Rapid Research for the eagle tracking article, that initial one. And I'm not sure where the next one is going to go yet.
But something in Audubon magazine.
Yeah, yeah. I love the research. I don't like the write-up. Well, thank you very much.
Hey everybody, we're gonna take a 10-minute break, so we can change out the technology and get everybody moved in here. You're welcome to stay in here if you don't want to move, or go get some water, or whatever you would like. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. Oh, and somebody, Laura found this in the women's bathroom, so if you are missing a notebook, please come see me.
Oh, right, okay.
Neil Reddick and Bob Anderson have been friends for a very long time as well, and just as Brett's work with eagle tracking initiated our own work with eagle tracking, Brett's work, Neil's work filmmaking initiated the Decorah Eagle Cam back in, I think, 2007 or 2008. They were working on the film The American Eagle, and once they were done, Bob said, hey, wouldn't it be fun to have this online? And so the rest is sort of history. However, beyond that, Bob and Neil traveled the globe. Bob said Neil brought me to the icy wastes of the Arctic, to the hot desert sands of the Sahara, and many, many places in between. He then told me some stories, most of which I can't really repeat here, but almost all of which ended up in really a wonderful surprise, and that's one of the things that's kind of been fun to learn about Neil and Laura. It seems like they always have something just really interesting and amazing going on. So I believe they're going to be talking about their conservation work in the Philippines today. And ladies and gentlemen, Neil Reddick.
Thanks, Iggy. First I want to say the work that Brett has been doing with Bob and Brett's work with bald eagles has been absolutely amazing. And it makes me realize that we live in the epicenter of bald eagle activity in the lower continental U.S. The only other spot in North America that can even come close is Alaska and the Chilkat River. up in Alaska where you get huge concentrations of eagles. But if I were to pick a place to be guaranteed to see an eagle, especially in the winter, it would be just driving up and down the Mississippi River. The bald eagle has made such an amazing comeback, and we're all so lucky to be part of it and supporting it. When I first moved to Wisconsin in 1990, you didn't see that many bald eagles, and it was really rare to see one. Now, from Dubuque to the Twin Cities, I think there's something like 300 nest sites in the Mississippi River Valley alone. And now eagles are nesting out away from water, in cornfields and cottonwood trees. They're becoming a kind of a new kind of creature. They're becoming a little bit more used to people, like the ones here in Decorah, and they have more tolerance to people than they've done in the past. So it's really great to see this success story. And the nest cam situation has been absolutely amazing as an educational tool. It's done so much for conservation. It's mind-blowing what it is actually done. There's people all over the world that are staying in tune with the Decorah eagles. And we should all be proud of this. And Bob's work has been absolutely instrumental in educating tens of thousands of people about not just the behavior of these bald eagles, but about as a window into the natural world where people can see the secret life of the eagles firsthand and with very little difficulty. It's very easy for people to watch it on monitors. The bald eagle situation is so good, and it's sad to realize that there are species on the planet that really, really need our help. And one is the Philippine eagle. The Philippine eagle only lives in the Philippines. It's the rarest eagle in the world. It's a forest eagle. There's only about 200 or 300 of these birds left. So you can imagine, the birds that Brett saw, the bald eagles flying in one day over Eagle Valley, way outnumber the entire population globally of Philippine eagles in the world. 95% of the habitat in the Philippines has been destroyed. 5% of the forest is remaining. The Philippine eagle cannot live in any other kind of habitat. It needs healthy tropical rainforests to live. It needs to find monkeys and flying lemurs and other things that it specializes in. It can't live in agricultural land. It's not adaptable. So without man's help right now, it's pretty much doomed. I went to the Philippines 38 years ago as a young man and made 16mm educational films for the Philippine people. And since then, it's been my dream to go back to the Philippines with new technology and give it one more go, give it one more attempt to try to help save that bird. So we collaborated with Cornell and Raptor Resource. Bob Anderson has been very helpful in this whole operation of getting this new program started and this new film venture going in the Philippines. My wife Laura and I set out to the Philippines a year and a half ago, working with the Philippine Eagle Foundation. They had found some nest sites, and we ended up staying 6 months on the island of Mindanao, working out of trees and blinds, getting as close as we could safely to the nest, coming back with unprecedented coverage and ultra-high definition of the eagle, and initiating a conservation program with Cornell is going to go on for a long, long time. My dream came true with the help and the encouragement of a lot of different people. It was a very, very difficult project, a lot of stress and hardship in the field. And what I want to show you today is a 6-minute kind of teaser clip that Cornell put together actually for the board of directors. If I can ask all of you too, since this film is in the editing phase, if you can kind of refrain from actually using your iPhones and cameras to record any of this. We've got to kind of keep it under the radar until this thing is edited and comes out internationally. So anyway, this is a 6-minute teaser of our work in the Philippines trying to save this critically endangered bird.
Right now, we're at what we call the close blind. It's only 21 yards from the nest site, just a little over 63 feet. And it's amazing because from here we got these big close-ups of the eagles that we can't get from any other positions. When a Philippine eagle looks right in your eye and makes eye contact, it's breathtaking. I remember clearly the first time I ever saw a Philippine eagle, and I was completely blown away by its beauty, how regal it was, and how different it was from so many other birds of prey that I know. It's got this beautiful crest that stands up, and it's got these beautiful blue eyes, and it's got bone-crushing, powerful feet, and it's huge. And it lives only in the Philippines, and it's the rarest eagle in the world. "36 years ago, when I traveled to this country with some good friends and associates, we spent 18 months filming the eagle for the first time. The Philippines is not the place it was. The population's doubled. The forests are almost completely gone. 50 years ago, maybe 60 years ago, there were thousands of Philippine eagles. When the logging started heavily, and the population of humans escalated, and the land was abused, the eagles dwindled down to the point now where they're at a population of about 300 or 400 birds. It almost seems as if when we're here watching these eagles from our blinds, that everything is okay. And they're in this forest. But we've got to remember that this is a tiny fragment of forest, and everything is not okay. The 3 eagles that live here are 3 of 300 birds in the world. I think one of the things that kind of makes me sad, makes me emotional, is watching this baby grow up, watching him becoming a Philippine eagle, watching him feather around, getting that sharp vision that eagles need to find food, just looking so noble and so beautiful. But what's going to happen when he leaves this nest site? What's going to happen the day he flies? What's going to happen when his parents start forcing him to become independent? He's going to have no place to go. The forests around this little tiny mountain are gone for miles. There are no forests. So the future for this little bird is not looking very good. And it just tugs at my heart to think that he may not make it. The ray of hope is that there are people that are dedicated
to conservation around the world. And if there's any way, if there's any hope at all, I think we've got to do what we can. And that's why we're here doing this project. We can't just give up and throw our hands in the air and say that the eagle is doomed. Because if we have that attitude, it will be. So that's why I've decided to dedicate a good part of my life to help save this bird. And the way we do it is through images that hopefully will inspire, teach, and give people a pride in the Philippine eagle that will continue for many, many years and maybe help keep it from going over the brink into extinction. I don't think there's any way to save the Philippine eagle or any endangered wildlife without a direct connection. And if we can succeed in that emotional connection, I think we have a chance to help save this bird. I think what we're gathering here is going to have so much educational value down the road. I hope it helps by stimulating people, by inspiring them maybe to realize that a Philippine eagle or a rainforest fragment or a tree or an insect, a frog, they're all worth saving because they're unique. They're pieces of art of the natural world. If there are enough pairs like this that are protected carefully, and there is replanting of forests, and future generations of Filipinos become avid conservationists, there is a chance this bird will make it. You save the forest, you're saving the Philippine eagle and everything else that lives there. All the other rare and endemic plants and animals that are only found here in the Philippines will be saved. The natural world has given me joy and happiness, inspiration. Has given me basically everything I've ever wanted. It's time for a payback. Philippine eagle, right there. Thank you. My payback and my wife, Laura, her payback, our payback collaboratively to the Philippine eagle and to the natural world to do whatever we can with the years we have left where we can still be active enough to go out and produce images and to do research work and to volunteer and do whatever we can to help the natural world, because once these creatures disappear, there's no turning around. They're not coming back. Thank God that we have a heavy conservation commitment in this country. When I came back from the Philippines, I told my wife I was going to kiss the runway, and I did. The chaos in the Philippines is unbelievable. The population exploding, the pollution, the habitat degradation. A creature like the Philippine eagle, unfortunately, the only place it lives is in the Philippines. We got to start thinking globally about the entire world, not just about the bald eagles we have here and other birds in this country, but the world is just one giant ecosystem and everything is interconnected. And we should all feel equally as proud to live on a planet that's got such beautiful creatures like the Philippine eagle. When I first started my research with birds of prey, it actually began down in the Amazon rainforest. when I was 24 years old, I went down and did the first films of harpy eagles in the wild. I ended up studying over many, many years 4 different harpy nests, 2 of them the complete nesting cycle. I worked a lot with the Peregrine Fund, who in the early 90s was breeding harpy eagles in captivity. I shared my nest sites in South America with the Peregrine Fund. I provided them with educational material, and they actually allowed me the privilege of having a captive harpy, which has been an ambassador for conservation, which we use for various presentations all over the world. So I'd like to introduce Cal. He's a male harpy. He's 14 years old, and he's a little bit of a handful for Laura, but she and Cal are now really good buddies. He is, just to give you an idea about his size, he weighs about 10 pounds, where a female harpy weighs anywhere from 16 to 18 pounds. He generally is quite peaceful and not very aggressive, but sometimes he gets a little bit rowdy, so we've got to be a bit careful. You can see how thick that gauntlet, that glove that Laura is wearing is. He just recovered from an illness last summer, and Laura is a veterinarian and was really handy. She was able to keep him going, and we're just tickled that we've got him, and he's healthy now.
What size aviary is he kept in?
He's kept in a heated enclosure, because being a tropical bird, we don't like to have him get down below 55. And during the summer, when conditions are right, we'll fly him outside with a transmitter on. Harpies eat monkeys and sloths, and just like the Philippine eagle, they live in the canopy of the rainforest. Unlike the Philippine eagle, which soars, harpies do not soar. They just fly like a big goshawk underneath, in between the big trees, rarely going very high in the air. The Philippine eagle, on the other hand, does a lot of soaring, as you can see in the film. It's kind of a daily routine, just like bald eagles. But both the harpy and the Philippine eagle are very specialized birds of prey that require healthy rainforests to be able to survive. Harpy numbers are much, much greater than Philippine eagles. They have a pretty big range, all the way from Panama in Central America, all the way down to the northern tip of Argentina. But just like all tropical rainforests, their habitat is threatened. But there's thousands of harpy eagles left in the wild, opposed to hundreds of Philippine eagles. So that's why we've now turned our attention back to the Philippine eagle, because it's so critically endangered. One of the things I'd just like to mention, Bob Anderson has been very, very supportive of initiating a Philippine eagle nest camp system. And we're looking into that now. We've got Cornell very much on board. So it's going to be a collaboration with Raptor Resource and Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. And we're really hoping to get a nest cam in the Philippines up and running as soon as we can, because we all know what the nest cam has done for bald eagles and for education in this country and around the world. If we could do the same thing for the Philippine eagle, I think it could buy it more time. When I say buy more time, in the Philippines, the eagles have to be kept alive in the wild. They have to be protected just long enough, hopefully, that attitudes will change and conservation methods will take effect and things might change for the better. And that's what we're hoping for down the road. You're welcome to take shots of Cal, by the way. It was just the Philippine eagle I heard about, but he's okay with flashes too. No, he's fine. He's fine with flashes.
Strongest right arm in the room.
Where'd Daddy go?
I'm gonna let Laura hold it a little bit longer, then I'll take over, because he is a pretty heavy bird.
How trusting you are that he doesn't go after your nose or your face.
You know, with birds of prey, it's not really the beak that you have to worry about.
Wow, okay,
Yeah.
Is the beacon after, I mean,
Yeah, the beak is just, this is our game that we play, so. I keep him busy with this thing.
so essentially they kill with the talons and tear the queen with the.
Yeah, the question was, you know, essentially they.
Anybody that handles raptors, especially handling, we know these birds are
That's the word you could use. They are scary. When they start applying pressure, and if you are in the wrong situation at the wrong time, you can be in a lot of trouble. So it's nothing to take lightly handling large raptors, or any raptor, but especially the large ones like the harpy, Philippine eagle, bald eagle, golden eagle. They're all so powerful. It's really hard to explain it, but believe me, it's unbelievable.
Hey, Neil?
Yes, sir.
Talking about the Philippine eagle and only existing in the Philippine Isles. Now, out of ignorance, I don't know, are there more, they only exist within the Philippine region. Are there more land masses nearby that are similar enough to the Philippines where an introduction program could be held?
Yeah, Dave, that's a real good question, Dave. Everybody could hear that, I think. Dave was asking about whether or not maybe the birds could be relocated to other islands in the Philippines or places nearby that are similar. That's a question that comes up a lot, and historically they were only found on 4 of the islands in the Philippines, 4 of the bigger islands. Luzon in the north, Leyte in the central Philippines, Samar in the central Philippines, and all the way down to Mindanao. Mindanao is a big island in the south. There are other islands in the Philippines, but they've been completely denuded of rainforest. And if the eagle, unfortunately, if you were to release Philippine eagles on some of the neighboring similar type habitat in other, like in Asia, like Borneo, then you'd be interfering, of course, with the natural scheme of things and throwing off that balance there. So then it would be considered an introduced species. So the only hope for the Philippine eagle is to save every last bit of rainforest that's left, which isn't very much, and hopefully in the future replant trees and keep the birds alive in the wild and augment the wild birds with captive bred birds. There's been a breeding project in the Philippines since the early 80s, and they've bred about 25 birds. But there's no place to release them, that's the problem. So there's plans right now to start a breeding project at the San Diego or the LA Zoo and have at least another satellite breeding project in case a disease wipes out the breeding project birds in Mindanao in the Philippines. At least there'll still be some captive birds somewhere.
Now, what kind of, did he get a virus that he was sick, or what?
Laura can explain that. I think I'll hold it for a while. She can come to the microphone.
Oh my.
Cal used to dislike me intensely, but I spent 2.5 months cramming a tube down his throat to feed him every day, and now he likes me quite a bit. He was very ill last summer and started out regurgitating food, not eating, lost a lot of weight. we did many tests on him. He had CT scans and biopsies and endoscopy procedures, and the only thing, and all sorts of cultures and blood work, and we just found some mild inflammation on the GI biopsies, and after many different attempts at treatments, and he lost, well, right now he weighs about 155 ounces, and he was down to 116, and he could barely stand and barely perch, and we finally, because of the inflammatory changes, put him on prednisone, and he responded pretty instantly and was on prednisone for about about 3 months, and gradually weaned him off. So some type of inflammatory bowel disease, but maybe initiated by a virus, although we did all sorts of viral testing, West Nile and herpes virus and that sort of thing. So, and most types of inflammatory bowels continue, inflammatory bowel diseases continue long term. So we were thinking, are we going to have to find some sort of like novel protein diet for a harpy eagle? But fortunately, that really hasn't been an issue, and he's healthier than ever, we think.
Gaining weight.
Oh yeah, he's back to it.
I know, I panic when my Amazon loses 25 grams.
Right.
What do you feed them?
Mostly the freshest roadkill we can find. we have usually a cooler in the back of our cars, and if you're driving behind somebody and suddenly they slam on the brakes, run out and grab the squirrel off the road. It's probably me. With my sunglasses and hat pulled down low. No.
Actually, it's pretty funny to watch Laura at work picking up a roadkill.
We do have a lot of other food sources, quail and rodents and that sort of thing, but I think a variety of fresh foods, and he likes mammals, has been really instrumental in his survival.
In the wild, they actually eat two different deer species. The Central American white-tailed deer they'll eat, and also the red rocket deer. They'll hunt fawns or small younger deer. So he loves venison, and that's pretty easy to come by in Wisconsin and Iowa.
Is their lifespan comparable to a bald eagle?
Yeah, they can live 40, 50 years.
He's
about 40. He's still a young bird.
Do they also make for life like bald eagles?
Yes, they do. Yeah. And like bald eagles, harpies take about 4 to 5 years to become mature.
How did he become non-releasable?
Well, he was bred to be released into the wild, but the Peregrine Fund had to stop releasing birds because they were having, all of the birds were released were being shot. So that's, then they put the release on hold, and then that's when I got him as just a partner in conservation. And we do things like this with him as much as we can. He's also a movie star. He's been in quite a few educational films.
Neil.
What does that mean? What is that?
How many pounds?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I hear that figure that people have for different birds of prey.
I was wondering about the Philippine.
Yeah, the Philippine eagle, the harpy this is the most powerful of all the eagles.
Okay.
The Philippine eagle is pretty close. But the harpy, and this is a small harpy. Now imagine, like I said, this guy weighs 10 pounds and the females can weigh up to 18. Can you imagine an 18-pound rather than a 10-pound bird on my fist? My arm would be way down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Did you have any, I saw a film on Nova or PBS a while ago. Did you have anything to do with that, about the harpies?
We were called by the producers and they picked our brains. But, yeah.
How was he cared for while you were gone for your
We've been lucky enough to have various people. In fact, there's a young man here right now, a guy named David, who's right behind you, who cared for Cal when we were in Japan recently. So Yeah, we've been lucky enough to have some really good people help us when we're gone. Being gone and having animals is quite difficult.
Amen.
As everybody knows.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So when you release him in the summertime just to exercise, I mean, does he hunt then too?
He has chased things like squirrels and so forth, but you know, the problem is hunting seasons here are usually in the fall and winter, and he doesn't do well when it's cold. So I've actually brought him to other places to fly him, like I brought him to Arizona one year. And it's just so nice to get him out and see him flying around and getting exercise. So we try to do that as much as we can, but the black flies are an issue.
The past few years, especially, the black flies have made it so we can't really fly them in the summer very much at all.
So he's like trained like a falcon to come back.
Yeah, the same principle. He comes to a whistle or to a lure. And, you know, we put a transmitter on him because now he
decides to go on vacation without you.
How do you know they'll come back the first time?
They don't always come back the first time. Anybody here that's trained birds of prey for falconry knows that sometimes the first time is the last time. It's happened to me a few times.
How many do they have in a clutch?
Sorry?
How many in a clutch?
I'm sorry?
How many
Oh,
eggs?
they lay 2 eggs usually, but they only rear one. So when the first egg hatches, they kind of don't incubate the second one. Yeah. Way back.
Do you have a sense of where the Philippine government is in terms of their efforts to help facilities?
Oh yeah, I mean we've spent so much time in the Philippines way back when and recently. When I was there the first time, we were actually we had support from President Marcos, who actually helped start the breeding project, which now morphed into the Philippine Eagle Foundation. But it's just, there seems to be such a disconnect for the vast majority of people in the Philippines from the natural world. It's really frightening.
And also, I spent a lot of time working with the DENR people in the Philippines, and there's a sort of a theoretical, yes, we want to save the Philippine eagle, but there's not the resources committed to what is required, and then there are an awful lot of layers of government. Everyone needs to be paid off to accomplish this or that, and so it's a very complicated situation, and nobody is saying we shouldn't save the Philippine eagle. It's just there's not a commitment from the upper levels, and that's one of the things that we're really hoping to change. There was, based on our work and with a lot of our footage, a 90-minute special that just aired in the Philippines in June, and a big social media campaign that is generating quite a bit of interest, and we hope support from the government as well as Filipinos who maybe have the resources to help support those programs. And there will
hunting the Filipino eagles.
Laura can answer that.
Yes.
That my niece lives in Manila, and that's what she said. A lot of the people are.
Since we were there, 3 birds have been shot.
Laura can answer that.
Yes.
That my niece lives in Manila, and that's what she said. A lot of the people are.
Since we were there, 3 birds have been shot.
Laura can answer that.
Yes.
That my niece lives in Manila, and that's what she said. A lot of the people are.
Since we were there, 3 birds have been shot. And that is one of the things, I mean, reforestation and forest corridors and protection of the forest is going to take a long time, but no more Philippine eagles have to be shot. That's something that can change instantly, and they still are, unfortunately. We're hoping the educational efforts and the social media campaign will help put enough pressure from Filipinos to other Filipinos, that is just not an acceptable thing.
Is it just for their own entertainment?
It's not generally sport. I mean, there may be different reasons. Oftentimes it's because they're seen as competition. Maybe they're going after someone's chickens or pigs. The young birds, when they disperse from an area, usually have to fly over a huge denuded agricultural area because they're, as Neil was saying, just these tiny, tiny fragments of forest that are left. So the young birds don't have any option other than to go over places where there are a lot of people and there are a lot of domestic animals, and so that's one of the issues. Recently, one was shot and eaten, so.
Oh my.
You folks get around the world a lot, so you know, places other than the Philippines. So I'm curious as to what degree you think ecotourism is a realistic and promising motivator for preservation, and to what degree does that have potential in the Philippines?
Anything that makes anybody money has potential in the Philippines, and many places in the world. I mean, this is an extremely poor country, and for the most part, people aren't thinking about the Philippine eagle because all they're thinking about is how am I going to put food into my kids' mouths tomorrow. And they're not thinking about what's the forest going to be like in 50 years. And so I do think that ecotourism, you know, has a real potential. There's actually a very visible nest, Philippine eagle nest, close to Davao, which is a city of 1.5 million people in the Philippines, that drew in the last year a lot of photographers and people from all over the world, but that did not stop the male from that nest being shot.
Yeah, that male was shot. It was like incredibly tragic for us because we did a little bit of filming at the Mount Apo nest. It was the most high-profile nest in the Philippines, and as Laura said, ecotourism was active there. People were coming in from all over the world. Somebody still shot the bird.
Is it a criminal offense or not?
It is a criminal offense, and the Philippines has lots of laws to protect the birds and protect the forest. It's just that they're very often not enforced, and there are very, you know, sometimes a slap on the wrist for doing that sort of thing. There is a wonderful organization that we are working with in the Philippines called the Philippine Eagle Foundation, and they're doing amazing work, and they understand that it's a big picture problem. It's not enough to say, don't cut that tree or don't shoot that eagle. People need a way to make a living. They need to figure out how to live in conjunction with the trees that are left. And so the Philippine Eagle Foundation does amazing work working with the communities that are close to eagle habitats, finding alternative methods of support, sustainable agriculture that can be done, you know, within the forest that's remaining. But they are really, really lacking in resources and support, and they're just barely hanging on. So one of our big goals for this whole project is to generate support both in the Philippines and worldwide for this organization that is struggling so hard to save, you know, to save their birds. So it's an organization that anybody can support. Also, Cornell Lab of Ornithology now has a really strong partnership with the Philippine Eagle Foundation. It's something Neil and I feel really good about, that if we walk away from the project right now, the support, the partnerships, including with Raptor Resource, would be there and would be in place. So.
I'd just like to say one more thing to, let me get a little closer to the microphone. Sure.
Back to his mama. I'm really excited about you know, the possible nest cam with Raptor Resource and Bob's dedication to this project. You know,
raptor resource through Bob, he's already sent to the Philippine Eagle Foundation and to our project, climbing equipment, an initial nest cam at the breeding project 3 years ago. They ran into some technical problems because that's the way it is in the Philippines. But if we can get a nest cam going there and the world can dial in like they have with the Decorah nest cam, it's going to be good for the birds. I really believe it. So I can't wait to get Amy over there. Never climb a 200-foot tree and help us. Thanks, everybody, and thanks to Bob for his
continued support to this project and his great dedication to raptors. Any other questions?
How did, when they had the bad storms over there, how did that affect things?
And the question was about the storms in the Philippines. We actually took off, I think, 2 days after Cyclone Yolanda hit the Philippines, and it disrupted a lot. It didn't actually hit the island of Mindanao, where we were working, but it did affect all the airlines, and it affected just everything. And unfortunately, cyclones hit the Philippines every year. And a lot of Philippine eagles that are nesting in the central Philippines on the island of Samar and Leyte were probably affected by that. And who knows? I mean, nobody's out there recording it.
Yeah.
At that time, people were more concerned about just strictly surviving.
I just wasn't sure where you were.
Do you have any estimate about the amount of land you have now? How many eagle couples or that it'll support?
Well, there's in the area where we were working, the little fragment of forest. When I say little, it could only support 2 birds, and that's why it was so sad for us watching that baby grow up, knowing that when he fledged, he had no place to go.
Wow.
No place to go. And the chance of him surviving, flying out and getting in trouble over agricultural land and maybe chasing somebody's chicken, not a good thing. So that's the problem in the Philippines. The Philippine eagle is kind of set up in the classic way for the road to extinction. It's an island species. Its habitat is fragmented. It's never been common. It's always been rare. And to survive today, and the way things are with the overpopulation in the Philippines. When I was there in the late 70s, the population of the Philippines was 65 million. Now it's 110 million. So there you have it.
What's the row crop agricultural tree that you see the geometric pattern? Is that what's taking place?
That is palm oil.
Palm
Palm oil plantations have devastated other parts of Asia like Borneo, where they purposely clear the rainforest, the incredible, unique, ancient rainforest with trees that could be over 200 feet tall, and plant monocultures of palm oil. And it's happening in the Philippines. Also coconut plantations. Coconut plantations go from the shore up to the foothills and even beyond into the higher elevations on the mountains. And it's just like corn. It's a monoculture. You know, birds, people can eat it. Birds, maybe pheasants here will eat corn, but nothing nests in corn. So yeah, these monocultures are really nasty.
Does he make other vocalizations besides what he's been doing?
Yeah, he makes lots of different vocalizations. Really loud screaming, mournful calling. You know, and most raptors that live in jungles, in rainforests, have to be able to transmit that call so that they can be heard by and not seen, because you can't see your mate or your young one or other eagles because it's just so dense.
Often in cases of habitat destruction, it's the case that the remaining habitat is suboptimal, right? Like the gorillas have been forced to live in the different kinds of jungles of what they did traditionally. Is that the case with what remains in that small percentage?
Yeah, the question was, is the remaining forest marginal? Yes, and The remaining forest in the Philippines is only really basically where the logging equipment couldn't reach. So it's steep. It's so steep sometimes you don't even, the trees just can't grow on the vertical slopes. And there's just enough habitat. And maybe the area where we were filming the Philippine eagles and the clip you saw, there was just barely enough prey base there to keep that pair alive. And that's the story. There's one park in the Philippines that might have 4 pair of eagles, and it's the largest, one of the largest protected areas. But even that's not protected enough because farmers, slash and burn farmers, are whittling away at the perimeter every year, cutting a tree here and a tree there, and pretty soon, after time, it shrinks.
Excuse me.
Is there an estimate about how many harpies are left in South America?
It's a hard estimate to make, but you know, there's certainly thousands.
Oh.
They're in much better shape than Philippines.
You know, Mexico is basically extinct, right?
Yeah, there is an active nest of harpies in Belize, believe it or not. And their range historically went up into Guatemala and even extreme southern Mexico where there was rainforest. But they are rainforest birds, so that's the only place you're going to find them.
Excuse me.
Will he be stressed if we clap at the end of this day? If we applause, will he be stressed?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Not like Thora from last week.
We're going to probably bring him to the fish hatchery and put him on a perch if we can find something, so he'll be able to, unless the black flies are really bad, we might get John Dingley there to brush him off.
Another story, John.
I think the bird's been some kind of eyeing John.
Yeah, John's already been attacked by the
If
harpy.
John ran around down the frontier, he'd be
So we're going to put Cal back, and we really appreciate everybody coming here, and it was really a pleasure to...
Are you good? Yeah.